Much, Jillian. Well, thank you all for joining me today for my presentation, Strap on Your Sensory Goggles and How to Meet Your Child's Sensory Needs. My hope today is for you to leave with something that will leave you thinking about what you can do differently tomorrow. All of this information today is meant to help you not stress you out. So think about that first. Just like, you learn at a different pace than maybe your best friend does. Every child learns at their own pace. So, take a little from today or take a lot from today, but the goal is for it just to help you, not to cause you any further stress. Okay. I know you guys are already doing so much, but I applaud all of you for being here today. So our objectives for today are to develop an understanding of what sensory input is, identify signs of regulation versus dysregulation, and these might be terms that you are familiar with and have heard before. Understand how to meet your child's unique sensory threshold. Every child, every human really is unique in their own way. And so I want to help you understand your child. I also want to help you identify 2 to 3 organizing sensory strategies. A show of hands, I'm curious, how many of you would you say are familiar with this terminology? And if you're not, that's okay. I'm just curious. How many of you are familiar with this terminology? How many of you might this be really new to? These are big words, believe me. And I'm a bilingual therapist, so when I have to translate this is fun. Okay. So there's going to be a lot of what we call jargon, but there's going to be a lot of big words thrown out. So if you don't understand something and something just seems really out there for you, please just ask, because I can guarantee you that you're not alone. So a little bit about me. My name is Renee Martinez. I am originally from the big old state of Texas. I've lived here in California now for going on 7 years. I have a master's degree in occupational therapy. My entire career, I've worked in pediatrics, a variety of settings from outpatient clinics to early intervention, done things with splinting, things like that. But I would say my passion is definitely in early intervention. I have 2 dogs. The little guy is Poncho, the big guy is Bronson, and I also have another handsome fellow in my life. This is my fiance, Taylor. Things that I love: cooking, love food, love running, and I'm really into yoga. I feel like you move to California and that's just what happens. So it's a little bit about me. So thank you all for sharing a little bit about you earlier. As Jillian said, so this presentation is provided by Redwood Coast Regional Center and funded by the MHSA grant. I'm in partnership with California's Department of Developmental Services. Redwood Coast Regional Center is solely responsible for the content of this presentation. The Department of Developmental Services has not developed, reviewed, endorsed, or approved the content. So they found me, and I'm here to share information with you. So we're going to start with a fun activity. If you have a piece of paper, great. If you don't, you can just take note right here. I want you to think of 1, 2, 3 things that bother you daily, like things that you can't stand. It could be something, it could be a smell, it can be a texture, it can be a food, it can be a sound. It could be something visual. Think of 1, 2, 3 things that bother you. I'll let you guys think about that. And then I want you to think of 1, 2, 3 things that you maybe crave daily. Things that, like, if tomorrow someone said, you cannot have this, you cannot use this, you cannot eat this, you cannot smell this, what would those things be? And I'm sure in your kiddos, right? Like there's things that you can see like, oh, they don't like that. I got to keep that away from them. And in your kiddos, you might see things like, oh, they really like that. And that puts them in their happy state, right? So I want you to think about those things, what those things are for you. And then you can start to think about what those things are for your little ones. So some things that bother me. The sound of grinding teeth makes me want to run the other way. When people are constantly clicking their pen, we're not in the office anymore, but that was tough, and people do it when they're thinking, right? It's like organizing sometimes. I can't eat corn on the cob because when those little string pieces get stuck in my teeth, it bothers me. The feeling of Jell-O, which is funny because I work with a lot of kids and we have to do it together. Things that I love. I love the smell of music in my house, like just to kind of set the ambiance. And I love coffee. That warm feeling and that jolt of energy is things that I crave. Does anyone want to share their examples?
Sure.
Oh, wow.
I don't like having wet socks.
Oh,
And then I can't stand like the sight or feeling of small holes, and large crowds bother me.
oh yeah,
And
definitely.
then for like cravings, sweets, and I need like quiet time.
To like reset, charge.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing, Cynthia. Crystal, did you want to share or was your microphone just off?
Okay, sure, I'll share. Some things that I really don't like are loud music in the car with the windows rolled up. It drives me crazy. And the sound of gritting teeth also bothers me. And I don't like to wear socks when I'm going to bed. And then things that I do like are, I love my sweets and just getting some fresh air every day and some like hopefully a little sunshine. And I feel like gardening is my release, like one of those things I really would miss if I couldn't do it.
I love that. And it sounds like we all have things that are going to kind of help down regulate our nervous system, right? Like the things that we're like craving are things that really like help us go from up here to like down here, right? In energy. Thank you guys for sharing. So this is why you're here, right? You want to understand what is sensory processing. And sensory processing is the way that the brain receives, organizes, and responds to sensory stimulation from our environment. So there are things that we see, hear, smell, taste, touch, perceive, right? If you get pushed, you are perceiving your body moving. Also, if there's things that you're doing, whether you're jumping, you're perceiving your body position changing, right? So as we move forward, we dive a little bit deeper. When you're thinking about how your child is processing information, it's how their brain receives it, organizes it, and responds. Just like you receive, organize, and respond to certain stimulation, they're doing the same. And again, their sensory system is working in a different way, just like all of ours are working in different ways. So when you're looking at this, and I'm going to go ahead and pull this out so I can see my notes. I'm sorry if this gives you guys. I'm going to stop sharing and then pull this out. Thank you guys for being patient with me. The pressure's like always on when you're in charge of the technology. I'm sure you guys have felt this before. And if you haven't, you are lucky you haven't. Okay. And let me pull my notes up. All right. Okay, everyone can see. Okay, perfect. And okay, perfect. So a child with potential sensory processing challenges might have difficulties processing things such as hot temperatures, cold temperatures, challenges with processing the sensation of hunger or fatigue. Sudden changes in environment, such as an unexpected flash of light or an unexpected sound, unexpected touch, can trigger really strong emotions, big feelings. So while such sensations can go unnoticed for neurotypical children and adults, in a child that is neurodiverse, it can cause a neurological sensation of like panic. So we are constantly processing a variety and array of senses. And for a child that is neurodiverse, their response might be, and often is, and when I say atypical, it is a stronger response than what we may respond to. And oftentimes too, for our kiddos that are pre-verbal and have emerging communication skills, behavior is their form of communication, right? They can't explain to you that they felt, the sense of their shirt on their tummy and it felt like a spider we feel on our arm, but it felt that way to them. And it could cause like this like neurological panic, right? They might not be able to explain to you that, walking into the grocery store is kind of like how you feel when you're standing in a large crowd, but they can show you like, Mom, this is not my cup of tea, and this is too much stimulation. So keeping in mind that we're constantly processing a variety of stimulation, right? And it's all being processed at once. And if your sensory system is working, as we would say, neurotypically, you would have all of these senses processed, and then you'd get like a response where it's like, okay, I have to filter out what I don't need, and I'm going to respond to what I should. So oftentimes we can, if we hear the plane going over us while we're walking the dog, we can ignore the sound of the plane. But oftentimes for our littles, or even, if we are working with an adult that is neurodiverse, that might be really challenging, right? To filter out the sound of that loud plane. It can really cause a strong neurological response, ear covering, trying to hide because they weren't expecting it. So when you're seeing strong sensory responses to, your day-to-day environment, their filtering system oftentimes has to work much, much harder. And if we understand that, it'll help us understand them much more.
Can I have a question?
Sure.
So my daughter has a visual and auditory processing problem.
Mm-hmm.
When she was a little, I took her to the medical doctors, specialist.
Mm-hmm.
They did not have enough experience to work with who is nonverbal, who cannot follow their direction.
Mm-hmm.
And auditory test or vision test was not completed because my daughter was not capable to follow their direction. So, but we still know she has a sensory issue, like a processing abnormality, like she has a peripheral vision, and also she has a depth perception issues, and her hearing. Actually, her speech therapist found she has a certain way of abnormality to hear it, and she needs time to process. So my question is, have you ever worked closely to evaluate someone who has symptoms with medical professionals?
And I want to say your question back to you to make sure I'm understanding. So your question is, do I have experience like working with medical professionals who potentially, so working with medical professionals who are assessing other areas within a child?
Right. So maybe my daughter have a double vision kind of a thing, right? So she might need the glasses, but I never found good enough to evaluate my daughter, assess my daughter's problem done by a medical professional, because usually the pediatrician or specialty, they
Mhm.
work with the neurotypical, not like someone neurodiverse. So
Mhm.
it's really challenging for me to take my daughter somewhere who knows my daughter's problem.
Mhm. When it sounds like it's also potentially allowed for things to maybe get missed because
Mhm,
it's challenging to actually assess due to
mhm,
like the requirements, right, for assessments to be done. Um, I know that there are more and more medical professionals who are becoming more familiar with working with children and with adults that are neurodiverse.
mhm,
um, to also ask them what their preferred form of communication is, or working with their parents to understand what their preferred form of communication is. Whether, they do have AAC devices and using those to communicate with the child. Um, in your area, I'm not too familiar with medical providers, and that might be something Jillian can also maybe talk to
mhm.
later. But I'm curious, if I was to be able to give insight, is there anything specific that you like, a specific example that you're looking for, Erin?
Yeah, still I'm looking for someone who can assess her vision, because it impact her daily life. Like she hesitant to step down from the stair, and having difficulties in walking in a paved road, like balance issues a lot. So yeah,
That
her
sounds-
neurologist right now is helping, but he kind of say, yeah, it's hard to find a good specialty pediatrician to
Mhm,
evaluate my daughter's problem. So
mhm,
If I could chime in, I am also having the same problem as well. My daughter, Alice, I'm still unclear if she has a vision issue or if she's stimming, because she's constantly looking out of the side of her eye like this. And I've taken her to the optometrist, the ophthalmologist several times, and I'm still not getting any answers. I think it's for the same reason, because they're not really used to working with neurodiverse individuals, really.
mhm. And that is a really good, well, both of you have pointed out that your children prefer to utilize their peripheral vision, and there is more and more research that has been produced to identify that children with autism tend to use their peripheral vision
mhm,
more so, and it tends to be stronger. What we have done, I know within our company, is worked with developmental ophthalmologists or optometrists who actually can do assessments, and usually they are working with neurodiverse populations.
oh,
So if you have a developmental ophthalmologist or optometrist in your area,
okay. So you guys' company is located in San Diego?
we're actually located in San Diego, but we're not a brick and mortar company. So it's fully remote.
Okay. Developmental ophthalmologist, you said?
Mhm.
Okay.
And I know she's an adult, your child. I know you mentioned she's
Mm.
25.
Yeah.
So I am curious. I'll have to think about that. We have an OT on our team who I would say her passion area is vision. So I can ask her.
Oh, okay, please.
it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
and
have
I'll
more
get your
information.
information
Yeah,
from Jillian, and we can be in touch, definitely.
okay, thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and.
Could I chime in on that too? I have the same problem. And I'm referred out of the area. I don't know if everybody has like that same being referred out of the area. Just like the doctor being like, sorry, it's just not gonna happen with this kid. So I don't know. Is that what's everybody, is that what happens with everybody? That we just all just get referred? Like I'm referred to like San Francisco or Southern California. So I was wondering if that's just typical for our kids, that we do just have to like seek help from.
Like
away.
physicians that are like are comfortable working with
Yeah.
population. I mean, it's really great to hear that because that shows that there's definitely a need. So that's something that we can definitely look into. I know you guys aren't too far from San Francisco, but you're not close. So it might be something to look into and see if there's maybe like a clinic or something that you can set up for what maybe they could visit like once a month. Or I know that there's, I worked for California Children's Services and they would do something like that where they'd have like a clinic for each insurance and like doctors from the particular organization would come. So that might be something, I don't know, Jillian, if that's something that you could speak to, but we could definitely think about that.
I know at least here in like Mendo and Lake County, I think a lot of our families do end up getting referred to either like UC Davis or UC San Francisco, to the Bay Area. And I know in Humboldt, it's even harder, you know, because if we don't have professionals up there and they're being referred down to San Francisco, that's like 4 or 5 hours. And I don't know, I know a few of you are here in Mendo. Erin, I don't know your location. But one thing that they had set up in Humboldt, which I know this isn't Vision, but Regional Center had set up like a monthly opportunity where someone from UC San Francisco that specializes in gastrointestinal stuff would come up there to do like a GI clinic. And so I'm, you know, hearing all of this, I'm wondering if it might be something I could bring to our internal team and see if there's other types of professionals that could do that same thing, including like vision or hearing. Because I know that it's such a extra stress to have to drive so far just to get a regular, you know, test that you or I could do just down the street. So thank you guys for bringing that to my attention.
Definitely. This is something I'm going to think about that too, for maybe like something we can work on together. I keep hitting my sides. Okay. So, this might be a question that has crossed your mind. Does my child have challenges with sensory processing? So if your child does have difficulties with sensory processing, they might show over-responsive behaviors to sensory input. They might show under-responsive behaviors to sensory input. They might show seeking behaviors to sensory input. And so what does that mean? Over-responsive might be, and there's an example like putting on clothes and immediately wanting it off, or refusing to put on socks because the sensation just doesn't feel good. Under responsive, the kiddo that can probably like hit their head, no response. Throw themselves into things, no response. Seeking behaviors. You might have littles or have seen littles who like things in their mouth, up and down, all over the couch. Trying to get in between, climbing into your shirt, wanting to get into small spaces. Those would be examples of seeking behaviors. So some other common signs appear overly active, always on the go, very lethargic, kind of like low affect, doesn't really seem to respond to a lot, demonstrates challenging behaviors throughout the day. And there's really no apparent reason why. Like you could see like a pendulum swing from like one emotion to the other. Difficult time regulating their behavioral and emotional responses, increased tantrums, emotional reactions, or the need for control. The kiddo who like visually likes things, you know, lined up. The kiddo who visually likes their food separated. That could be just like a way where they're over responsive to like the color of the food. And it's like, I need it in a certain way. They're over responsive to the way things look. So they line it up. So it's like a certain way. Difficult time in new environments. Change can be tricky for a lot of our neuro diverse kiddos. And again, that's just, again, thinking about all the stimulation that they have to process. And it's like, I'm in a new environment and you want me to process all of this, you're going to hear and you're going to see like a no way, right? They might have really strong dislikes or likes, right? Like they really like certain things. I see this a lot in my littles with food. Really love the crunchy, salty, you know, carby foods. Really don't like the vegetable that looks different, tastes different every time, smells different every time. So some atypical responses to sensory input that we talked about: over-responsive, under-responsive, and sensory seeking. So if you're thinking what is typical and what is atypical, these would be like ways to help you categorize I'm not saying that they're the end all be all, but these are ways to help you really identify like, okay, what is happening in this moment? Is it like an over response to something? Is it an under response to something? Is it that they're seeking something? An example, my little 6-year-old on my schedule, she's actually from Redwood, was having teeth come in. 2 days at school were complete chaos. And no one could understand why. Nothing changed. Routine was the same. But what was coming in was her teeth. So she lost 2 teeth and they started to come out. And as soon as those came out and she was able to use her AAC, and she was like, my teeth hurt. Everyone understood what was happening. So then mom was able to give her something to put on her teeth. They were able to ice it. But in that situation, it would be like an over response. Like she's like, I can't communicate to you. I didn't know how until she was able to use her device. But like she was having an over response to the pain. It's painful for a neurotypical child, but also like, you know, a neurodiverse little who, you know, is still not yet communicating verbally. Her behaviors were her telling us, I'm not comfortable. So over responsive, meaning that they might avoid sensory input. So they might also have a low threshold for sensory input. And you often see an exaggerated response of the nervous system to whatever sensory stimulation it is that oftentimes people might find tolerable. Some cases, maybe not tolerable. For example, the nervous system may go into fight or flight mode even when there's no real danger. So in that case, like if you think about it, teeth are coming in, there's really no danger, right? It's something that's uncomfortable. But for her, it was causing this fight or flight where she was very upset. So if you're thinking about your over-responsive kiddos, they might present as over-responsive to sensory information in one or more systems. So it could be tactile and visual. It could be auditory and vestibular, right? Sometimes being in the car, it's like the sound of the highway and then also that movement of being, for our little ones, sometimes if they're still like reverse, right? It could be like multiple types of sensory input. They might present as tactile defensive and not tolerate clothing or other tactile input, paint, glue, soap on their bodies. They might present as fearful of movement, resisting swinging or playing on the playground. They might demonstrate difficulty tolerating a wide variety of food textures or smells and appear as a picky eater with exaggerated gag responses or throwing of foods, right? So our under-responsive. Going back. Okay, so our under-responsive littles. These kiddos seem passive to sensory input. So they seem not to register the sensory input that's around them. They require like intense or high levels of stimulation to register the input. Oftentimes I have given the example of like sometimes when we work with our littles with Down syndrome, they are under responsive and they need a lot of stimulation. So they oftentimes are our teeth grinders and they like will grind their teeth for that like input, but it's because they need a lot more input to feel that sensation. So higher levels of stimulation before they actually respond. They might also be unaware of sensory stimulation or demonstrate delayed or less intense responses. So sometimes these are also our littles that kind of like drape themselves on things, kind of bump into the walls. They're not really aware of their body and they're kind of passive. These kiddos might appear to be daydreaming or unfocused on what might be happening around them. They may appear to be quiet, play alone, appear just uninterested, might be difficult to engage with, demonstrate low endurance. They might require like more sensory input to get their sensory systems to respond. So kiddos that like really need to like kind of be encouraged to do just because they're a little bit more, they appear reserved, but it's because they need a lot more to get their sensory system going. These kiddos might also be the kiddos that are like mouthing objects and they just need a lot more stimulation. So our sensory seekers. These are the kiddos that are constantly craving sensory input. They seek out intense situations. They often may appear like disorganized due to the need for high levels of sensory input. The nervous system of the sensory craver needs intense input for sensation to be registered. The kiddo that can be rolled, tossed, thrown, climbing, on the swing for extended periods of time. They're constantly touching, crashing, and moving. Oftentimes they may not have awareness of personal boundaries. They're usually going at 100 miles per hour. They may also demonstrate decreased safety due to impulsivity, excessive risk taking. They might appear to be in constant motion, but may be clumsy and awkward, frequently falling, maybe even bruising themselves. Kiddos, for example, that might constantly like break crayons or like really draw really hard, or color really hard. They might hurt others unknowingly, like kiddos that are constantly moving and might just like run right over you and like not even realize like, hey, mom's right here. What are you doing? And they're just kind of like on the go. So let's take a look to see what these responses look like for each individual sense. So if you're thinking about vision, and you're more than welcome to take a screenshot of this, and because you can also think about your little one later and fill it out for your own child. And you can kind of think about, do you feel that they're over responsive, meaning that they're kind of like avoiding specific stimulations? Are they under responsive? They might be more passive. And are they seeking it, right? Or would you say that they also might be typical? Because it's not that every system might be atypical. So if you're thinking about vision, so if a child is responding in an avoidant manner, they might squint or cover their eyes. So bright lights might be like disturbing. Going outside, going from inside to outside, kiddos might not like that. Avoiding direct eye contact. Oftentimes for our neurodiverse population, direct eye contact can be, I'm trying to think of the word that has been used. It can feel invasive. I feel like direct eye contact is hard for like neurotypical humans, but it can be more intense for our neurodiverse populations. Becoming distracted in busy environments or withdrawal from movement, and also difficulty locating objects, meaning that, having to process, and you all share that vision sometimes has stood out to you. So our ability to scan in a grocery store and pick out what we need might be challenging for a little when there's too much to actually have to track and isolate, like track and then identify what it is that we need. So under responsive. Oops. Wow, I keep doing that. Sorry, guys. So under responsive. So again, this is more of a passive response. So delayed reaction to light, doesn't seem bothered by light at all. Difficulty to get their attention because they may not see objects in their path, often bumping into them, and pays little attention to moving objects or bright lights. So a kiddo who is visually seeking, loves shiny, bright objects, like give it to me. Those things at the carnival that spin. They might be like, yes, give it to me. And they could stare at it all night long. Loves light up toys, loves the TV screen, like anything moving, like flashing, like, fast paced lights. That would be a kiddo who's like a visual seeker. Constantly watching moving objects, sometimes too, just staring at cars, like kiddos love that. Seeks visual stimulation, such as things that spin. Fans are a big one. Sometimes too, it could be like a spinning toy. And that's like usually when you know that the kiddo is visually seeking something. Hearing. Okay, so some avoidant behaviors. They easily startle or become upset to noise. My example earlier with the plane, right? Covering ears or hides in social situations. Avoids everyday noises. I hear this a lot. Toilets, the blender, the dog barking, the vacuum cleaner. Those would be like your hearing. I would say that your hearing, I would say, is like sensitive. So it's like over responsive behaviors tend to elicit from these everyday noises, but when I say too much, it's something that they're still having to process, right? Difficulty focusing on a speaker. So if someone is talking to them, they might have a hard time, especially like, let's say in a classroom setting, it might be really challenging for them to identify that voice and pay attention. Some passive behaviors for hearing. Doesn't seem to register sounds in the environment, doesn't startle at very loud noises. The kiddo that could hear the fire truck go by and not be fazed. Delayed reaction time to sounds or words. You're calling their name, Johnny, Johnny, Johnny. And it's like, it's just taking them a little bit longer to respond, and seems to miss sounds in their environment. A seeker loves to make loud sounds. The kiddo who's going to love the splashing, the kiddo who's going to love, like the sounds that like the toys that, you can shake and make a lot of noise with, seems to always use an outside voice or scream, prefers loud music, puts instruments like right next to their ear or brings it right up to you, and seems to be calmed by noises or certain music. Like if you play music for them or you have certain songs or sounds, like it soothes them. And it's because they need auditory input. They crave that. Any questions on this?
Yeah, can a child be over responsive and seeking with hearing?
With what was the example with what?
I'm just wondering if like a child could have like over responsive behaviors and then also seeking behaviors when it comes to hearing.
Definitely. And again, it's just like we want to understand, in those situations, where does the behavior kind of fall? And then that'll help kind of guide, how we can understand it. And then if we can support them, then we can. Sometimes there's some things that it's like we can help them to a way to where it improves maybe how they're engaging with their environment. Some things like, if loud sounds are going to be challenging, there's some things that we can fix and some things that we can't. And when I say fix, I mean in a way that we can support them to be able to engage with their environments in ways that's going to help them enjoy their environments without having, these strong responses that might be like emotionally distressing for them. But yes, to answer your question, yes, we can definitely see a mixture of behaviors. Okay, we're moving into smell. So some over-responsive or avoiding behaviors, avoids particular smells, becomes agitated around certain smells, gags with certain smells or food, avoids food due to smells. Passive, doesn't seem bothered by strong smells and misses smells in their environment. Seekers, smells objects that may seem odd, enjoys strong scents, prefers foods with strong smells, and constantly smells objects and people. Taste. So an over-responsive reaction, avoiding new foods, prefers bland foods, and may gag on foods with flavors. This would be like an example of a kiddo who does not like, and I would say most children, and this again is generalization, would love ice cream, would love cake, right? Something yummy, sweet. But I have seen kiddos who you give them a piece of cake and they will gag. And it's just like their sense of taste is sensitive. And that's just something that could take time, in therapy, but also we just kind of follow their lead, definitely, in helping expand their diet. Under-responsive, does not seem to care for bland or strong flavors, does not seem to notice new flavors, requires very strong flavors to get a reaction. And for our seekers, I think I see these most often than not, constantly puts objects in their mouth. And this is a good one, Cynthia, where I can see kiddos who are constantly putting objects in their mouth, but then do not eat anything. And I'm not sure if you guys have dealt with that. Everything in their mouth, but they won't put anything that is actual food in their mouth.
Yeah, that's my problem.
Okay. Yeah. So And again, it has to do too, potentially too, with like, what is their sense of smell doing? What is their visual system doing? Because if you think about it, and in my picky eating webinar, like mealtime is one of the only activities where you're using like every single organ and sensory system in your body. You know, you're using your sense of sight, your sense of smell, your sense of taste. So we often will be like, oh, it's just taste, but actually there's a lot more going on, right, with mealtime. These kiddos often prefer really strong flavors, and oftentimes they will eat almost anything to the point where it may not even be food. So thinking about that. Touch. Dislikes textured foods. They're bothered by clothing. They're sensitive to temperatures, withdraw from touch, becomes upset if dirty. I'm sure some of you have seen this, like will probably get messy, and then as soon as something's on their hands, they're like, I don't want it on my hands, please get it off. Or the kid, like you go to touch them and they like immediately withdraw. So that would be like an over responsive reaction to like something that is a general sensation. Passive behaviors, delayed response to touch, completely misses touch. Seeking behaviors, they crave crunchy foods, they smash foods all over their hands, face, body, touch anything, dirt, Play-Doh, clay, they're like in it. Does not seem to feel pain or cold, might seek touch through deep pressure, tight, heavy blankets. So proprioception, how many of you are familiar with this term? Okay, so some. So proprioception is this big fancy word for the, I would say it's a sensory system, but it's a system in our body that allows us to know where we are in space. It gives us feedback into our muscles and our joints, and it allows it allows you and I to both close our eyes, put our hands out, and still be able to know where our arms are in space, be able to touch our toes with our eyes closed, touch our nose. It tells us where we are in space. And it's really important, right? So if we're thinking about those kiddos that are like running over you, bumping into you, tripping over themselves. Erin, you shared how your daughter also has difficulty with, stairs. Yeah, I love that you're like, it's her visual system, but it's also her sense of proprioception, right? Like she has to know where her hand is if she's holding the rail, also know where her foot is in space as she's going down. So, because I mean, we've also seen too, like in the blind community, right? They're able to navigate, right? Using their sense of proprioception. And obviously sometimes assisted devices too, most of the time. So this is something too to also keep in mind. I am so sorry, guys. Okay, so for over-responsive kiddos, they will avoid active games. They will avoid movement like running, jumping, climbing. They prefer to sit still. They avoid touching others, and they might seem uncoordinated. For under-responsive kiddos, they have, and it appears to have like poor body awareness, where it's like still emerging, still developing, but if you ask them to do like a jumping jack, or you ask them to do like, I would say like ask them to jump rope, do a hopscotch, do things where they're required to cross midline, it just seems a little funky. They might also, oftentimes these kiddos appear lethargic or lazy, but they might avoid doing, a lot of these active games. And they might require intense proprioceptive input to be regulated. So the kiddos who might just really want to be bear hugged by mom, might want to be like rolled up into like a little burrito with a blanket, love like the weighted blanket. They need more since they are under responsive to get that like sensation that they need. And then a seeker is a kiddo who needs a lot of proprioceptive input. So a lot of movement. So running into objects, walls, people, likes to like crash maybe into objects, or people, or on furniture, constantly climbing furniture, may show poor body awareness. And when I say poor body awareness, it's like a kiddo who doesn't really have a good sense of self. If you play, I know nowadays, like there's a lot of these like head, shoulder, knees, and toes, like fun, like, baby shark like dance videos, and you can kind of see if they're trying to follow along, it might be a little challenging for them. And so when you think of body awareness, it's like a kiddo who can move their body in sync with maybe in coordinated movements. And even like something as simple as like knowing where their shoes are, getting them coming back and being able to put their shoes on their foot, like knowing my foot is attached to my leg's attached to my tummy. So you can kind of observe your kiddos and say, like, you know, what's actually happening throughout the day, and it might give you a better idea. They might seem like they have poor personal space, don't really know boundaries, often might kick or bite or hit, may seem like they never stop moving, and they may crave like deep pressure and like a sense, like they might like the sense of a massage or like squeezes. Lots of occupational therapists will recommend that as like a calming strategy. But that pressure really helps downregulate their nervous system, but gives them that proprioceptive input. Okay, and then your vestibular system. So this is your system that allows you to know, it's like your sense of balance. It allows you to know that your head is like upright, and allows you to know when you're moving, whether it's like linearly or rotary. So you move linearly when you walk, but sometimes, and not that a lot of us do this anymore, but when you're on a swing, you know, kiddos tend to go in circles. We might do this on the highway. You know, you're going, you know, I know you guys all live up north. There's lots of windy roads up there, Highway 1, but you can feel your body, right, moving when you're on the highway, on Highway 1. So for littles, when, you know, they're younger, and Erin, I know your daughter's older, but our vestibular system keeps us safe, right? If you're falling and you just tripped, your vestibular system is going to tell you, oh my gosh, I'm going down and I got to stop myself. So some kiddos love movement, some kiddos don't. So kiddos that might avoid this type of stimulation would be scared of movement activities, would avoid swings, stairs, being upside down, difficulty with balance, appear clumsy or uncoordinated, might be scared of heights. There's often a correlation to, and it's great that you always get hearing checked too. Sometimes our kiddos might need earplugs too, and then that kind of helps, but that's something to always kind of keep in mind. For our kiddos that are under responsive, their delayed response to movement, again, might appear a little clumsy. They also require a lot more movement to actually respond and get a reaction. So there's kiddos that seem really melancholy. You put them on a swing and you start moving them, you start spinning them, and then you see like it clicks and they're like more awake and they're more engaged. Our seekers are the kiddos that seem like they're unable to sit still or seeking a lot of this movement, you know, whether it's a kiddo who loves to be like crawling around on like their bike or on their scooter board. They like to be jumping. That's also vestibular input. Need to be in constant motion, can be impulsive at times, may take unsafe risks, and it might be what we would call a level 10 on most movement activities, like they're constantly moving. And for some kiddos, this type of stimulation helps them really feel their body. And with that, then they're able to actually engage. So I remember when we were in, it was our discipline specific meeting when this analogy came to fruition. So the cups analogy. So what I like to think of it is that all of us have, you know, our cup, our sensory cup, and we fill it with what we need, right? And so here you see the visual of like, for kiddos that are over responsive, right, and they're more sensitive to stimulation, they have a smaller cup. For kiddos that are under responsive, right, their cup's a little bit bigger. And then for our kiddos that are seeking, their cup's a lot bigger. They need a lot more information. So it means that any kind of sensory input that is experienced throughout the day is kind of like a drop, right? And a few drops to each sensory cup is important, right? But when the cup overflows from too much sensory input, that's when you might experience like a sensory meltdown, right? And that's when you see that fight or flight or freeze mode, and your child then appears dysregulated. Dysregulated is a big word for upset. So these children can't tolerate as much input as other children. So kiddos that are over-responsive, they reach their capacity much faster and more often than neurotypical people or people that have a bigger sensory cup, right? They often experience the world as too loud, too fast, too hard, too sticky, too scary. So your under-responsive kiddos, right, have a larger sensory cup, meaning it can take more intense, more frequent, and longer durations of sensory inputs and information for them to register, that it's even there as compared to that. Wait, hold on. Where was I going with this? They can take more information for them compared to someone with an average size cup. So they need more because they are under-responsive. There you go. And that's going to help them feel regulated and alert to participate and function in their environment. So our sensory seekers, they have a really big sensory cup. And a lot of times when we are working with our neurodiverse population, we often first see these kiddos referred, right? I would say our sensory seekers are the ones that are referred first because these behaviors are more obvious. But, sorry guys, but we also have to remember that this can still happen, right? We might still see, kiddo who's not a sensory seeker, but having meltdowns because the world is too loud, too fast, too sticky, too scary. Okay. So, our kiddos that are sensory seekers have a really big cup, and oftentimes it's like there's a hole in it because you can give them, everything that they need, and then they probably still need more. So the goal is to try and set up your day in a way, or by understanding your child, to set up your day in a way that's going to help them respond to the world, or allow the world to respond to them really too, in a way that's going to help them be able to do more. Okay, so regulation versus dysregulation. Do I have everyone? Have I lost anyone? Just want to make sure. Any questions so far?
Seems like everyone's
Here.
still here. I am letting you know it's 5 o'clock though. So if people, start dropping, it might be because they might have only allotted themselves an hour.
No, okay. I'll try to be really quick too. 10 more minutes. So regulation versus dysregulation. So regulation is when a child maintains an appropriate level of alertness in order to respond appropriately across environments, right? You want to see like a calm body, they're attentive, they're engaged. Dysregulation is when, sensory systems are out of balance, right? This happens when the sensory system either gets way too much information, or oftentimes maybe too little, right? But oftentimes it's when there's too much information to be processed at once, and then we see a meltdown. Here's just like a really nice picture, right, of what dysregulation versus regulation can look like. But it's just like kind of thinking about things that might happen here is like you might hear, your little one uncontrollably laughing, like starting to move and bounce off the walls, screaming, unable to follow, impulsive. They might start drooling, their eyes might get big, they might start shrieking or yelling. So just keeping an eye out for, these signs and knowing that, this might be a time where we might need to. You have a question?
About the drooling, why does that happen?
Well,
This one is like the drool, like a lot.
Is it usually when you feel like he's like in regulation?
Sorry, he's while he eats.
Like all the time.
It's like just like I don't really know. It's just a lot of drooling. I didn't realize that is that just like a body process, like a body response to what? Like, why does that happen?
It could be that he's starting to get overwhelmed and he starts to drool is like a response when his body's going to fight or flight reaction. It could also be that there's poor body awareness, right? And he's not able to manage his secretions, right? So there's another thing too, that's like those tips for that too. Like it could also be like oral motor awareness or poor oral motor awareness, like understanding of his lips, his cheeks, his tongue, and he's just drooling a lot. So we could talk about this more too. So
Thank
how do
you.
you want to, yeah, of course. So how do you fill your child's sensory needs? So going back to that chart, where does your child fall, right? For each of those sensory systems. And then we can provide them with strategies. And the goal is to help your child kind of get their sensory cup just right. So I wanted you guys to kind of look at this and then go ahead and fill that out so you understand what your child's specific sensory needs are. And then we're going to start with, when we think of sensory regulation strategies, we always want like organizing, calming, and regulating. So we want to start with proprioception, right? So think about when you've gone, I don't know if all of you are into massages. I love massages, but we're going to try and kind of give your child's like nervous system like a massage, right? So it's like they just had it's like you just had a really bad day at work and you're like, I'm going to go get a massage. And so essentially your child's sensory system just had a really bad day and we need to help them, right? We want to help them calm themselves. And I'm sure moms, you're like, but I really need a massage. I get that. So proprioceptive input. So proprioceptive input is always a really great starting tool. So anytime your muscles, tendons, or joints receive active input against gravity, you're activating your proprioceptive system and receiving proprioceptive input. So deep pressure in heavy work is essentially what you hear from all occupational therapists, right? It's like, well, what is deep pressure? What is heavy work? So deep pressure is firm pressure applied to the body, and heavy work includes movements like pushing, pulling, climbing, lifting, carrying, and weight bearing. I'm going to see if I asked mom if I could show this video, and then I'm going to really try and wrap it up. I promise, Jillian.
You're
So
fine. This is all useful.
where is it? Okay, I think this is it. So I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with like massages and squeezes, and making like a tight little burrito. Okay, so this kiddo is one of my Spanish speaking families, but this little guy could not sit in his high chair before mealtime. And so we had mom pushing a laundry basket down the hall. Ay, Leo.
A ver, 1, 2, 3. Corre, 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 corre.
Bravo. So that's like just like a simple activity, but that is like an example of what proprioceptive input is. So you are essentially giving the body that like heavy work of pushing, right? And he's also pushing his feet against the ground. He's pushing the laundry mat, and then he's like turning it around, pulling, and then starting it again. So that is like a fun example of what heavy work is, you know, for our littles. So there's a lot of examples on here. So I'm going to show you guys again. But I love that video because he was just loving it. Other examples: wheelbarrow walks, climbing, crawling, pushing, pulling, obviously laundry basket full of clothes like you saw, household chores. I love having kiddos help with helping unload groceries, bringing in groceries. Those are like daily routines, things you do all the time, having them carry like toilet paper, which weighs nothing, but for them it's a lot, and it's safe. So first you understand, you know, what your child's needs are. You want to give them, right, calming, grounding, organizing, proprioceptive input. And then you want to fill their sensory cup to just right. So understanding where your child falls, right? Are they over responsive? Are they under responsive? Are they a seeker, right? So if they are over responsive, you want to break down the activity into small steps. So for my kiddos that don't like to touch things, you know, how can I get the Play-Doh in front of them? Right? How can I show them how to play with the Play-Doh without any pressure so they don't have a fight or flight response? Then provide sensory input in small doses and work your way up, right? So if I can get them to open the Play-Doh and take it out and then just drop it, and Miss Renee like plays with it, then that's a great start. So mom, can you just put the item in front and they're okay with it without having a fight or flight response? You're great. So the example here is child avoids sand. And I live in Southern California and I hear this all the time. And it's like, how do I get my child to play at the beach? So maybe playing with small amounts of sand, then going to the beach with their shoes on. Practice dipping their feet into the sand. Practice in sand barefoot for just a few minutes until the child is ready to play longer. For under-responsive kiddos, you want to provide increased amounts of sensory input to increase their arousal levels. So the child is passive to most food flavors, providing strong flavors and crunchy snacks throughout the day. Really like turn on that I would say like your sense of taste. Yeah. System. I'm blanking right now on what word I was trying to use. For your seekers, provide extra opportunities in their day for input. Think about times in your routine where you can add in sensory input. So if your child seeks movement by spinning, so provide extra opportunities for movement, such as jumping on the trampoline, swinging, rolling down a hill, a scooter board. So sensory-rich experiences during routines. So playtime, mealtime, bath time, outdoor play. And I won't go through all of these. I know you guys should have gotten the handouts and the PDFs. But I feel like bath time is one that you do every day. So things that you can do during bath time: practice blowing bubbles, pouring water over different parts of the body, trying different textured washcloths, trying a warm towel from the dryer after bath time, work on scooping, pouring, smelling different soaps. I know that we're over time, but I really hope that now you feel like you can put on your sensory goggles, notice the sensory input in your environments, and watch and see how your child responds. This will help support your child's ability to process sensory input and learn about the world around them. I feel like all of you are familiar with services and have sought them out. But if you want to chat about anything else, you're more than welcome to sign up for a free consultation with me. And I'll put that here in the chat in case you want to talk about something more specific. But thank you guys so much for your time. It was so wonderful to get to know each and every one of you.